The first night I heard it, the sound was coming from inside the wall. It wasn't scratching. It wasn't knocking. It was the slow, deliberate sound of something being dragged, so methodical that it felt like someone was testing whether I could hear it. I fell in love with the house the moment I saw it. Victorian architecture, wraparound porch, original hardwood floors that creaked in all the right places. The real estate agent called it charming. I called it perfect. It was exactly what I needed after the divorce. A fresh start in a town where nobody knew my name, nobody knew what Michael had done, and nobody would ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. The price was almost too good to be true. When I asked why, the agent hesitated for just a fraction of a second before smiling. The previous owner passed away, she said. Estate sale. They just want it gone. I didn't ask how they died. I didn't want to know. I just wanted the house. I moved in on a Tuesday in late September. The leaves were just starting to turn, and the street was lined with old oak trees that made everything feel like a postcard. My neighbor to the left was an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, who brought me homemade cookies within an hour of the moving truck arriving. The neighbor to the right was a middle-aged man I hadn't met yet, but I'd seen him watching from his window as I carried boxes inside. That first week was perfect. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, turning each room into something that felt like mine. The living room got my grandmother's armchair. The kitchen got new curtains, yellow ones that let in the morning light. The bedroom got blackout shades because I'd always been a light sleeper, and the street lamp outside my window was brighter than I'd expected. It was on the 8th night that I met him, Richard. I was taking out the trash around 9 p.m. when I saw him standing at the property line between our houses. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with thinning gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses that caught the porch light. He wore a cardigan even though it wasn't that cold, and he smiled when he saw me, a wide, eager smile that made his eyes crinkle. "You must be the new neighbor," he said, walking toward me with his hand extended. "I'm Richard. Richard Voss. Welcome to the neighborhood." I shook his hand. It was cold and damp, like he'd just washed it. "I'm Emma," I said. "Emma Reeves. Nice to meet you." He held my hand a moment too long, and when I pulled away, he didn't seem to notice. "Beautiful house you've got," he said, glancing past me toward my front door. "These old Victorians. They've got so much character, so much history." I used to visit the previous owner quite often. We were close. "That's nice," I said, taking a step back toward my porch. "I really should get inside. Early morning tomorrow." Of course," he said, but he didn't move. He just stood there, smiling, his hands clasped in front of him. "If you ever need anything, I'm right next door. Anything at all. I'm very good with houses. I know all their little secrets." The way he said secrets made my skin crawl, but I forced a smile. "Thanks. I'll keep that in mind." I went inside and locked the door behind me. Through the window, I watched him stand there for another 30 seconds before finally turning and walking back to his house. He didn't look back, but somehow I felt like he knew I was watching. That night, I heard the sound for the first time. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when it started. A slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across wood. It was coming from the wall behind my headboard, the wall that separated my house from Richard's. I sat up, listening. The sound stopped. I waited. Nothing. I convinced myself it was the house settling, old pipes, or maybe an animal in the walls. I'd read somewhere that squirrels could get into attics this time of year. But when I turned off the light and lay back down, it started again. Drag, pause, drag, pause. Always the same rhythm, always from the same spot. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I mentioned it to Mrs. Chen when I saw her watering her flowers. "Oh, these old houses," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "They make all kinds of noises. You'll get used to it." I asked her about Richard. "What's he like?" Her smile faltered, just for a second. "He's very helpful." she said carefully. Very attentive. He looked after the previous owner, toward the end. How did they die? I asked, even though I'd told myself I didn't want to know. Mrs. Chen's face went blank. I don't like to gossip, dear, but I will say this. Be careful with Richard. He means well, but he can be a bit much. Boundary issues. I didn't know what she meant, but I thanked her and went back inside. That afternoon, I was unpacking boxes in the spare bedroom when I noticed something strange. There was a small hole in the wall, about the size of a quarter, right at eye level. I knelt down and peered through it. On the other side was Richard's house. I could see directly into what looked like his living room. My stomach turned. I grabbed a picture frame from one of the boxes and hung it over the hole, then checked every other wall in the house. I found 2 more holes, one in the bathroom, behind the towel rack, one in the kitchen, hidden behind the refrigerator. Someone had been watching. I called a handyman that same day and had him patch all 3 holes. He didn't ask questions, but I saw the look on his face when he found the one in the bathroom. That's not normal, he said quietly. No, I agreed. It's not. That night, the dragging sound was louder, and this time, it was followed by a soft knock. 3 taps, evenly spaced, coming from inside the wall. I didn't respond. I turned on every light in the house and slept on the couch with the TV on. The next morning, there was a note on my door, handwritten on yellowed paper. I noticed you had work done on the house yesterday. If there's anything wrong, I'm happy to help. I know this house better than anyone. Richard. I crumpled the note and threw it away. Then I installed a security camera on my front porch. For 3 days, nothing happened. No sounds, no notes, no sign of Richard. I started to relax. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe he was just an awkward, lonely old man. Then I checked the security footage. Every night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., Richard came out of his house. He stood at the property line, staring at my bedroom window. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stood there for exactly 11 minutes, then went back inside. I watched 4 nights of footage. Same time, same spot, same unblinking stare. I called the police. They sent an officer who looked bored from the moment he arrived. Ma'am, he said after I showed him the footage, standing on a public sidewalk isn't a crime. Has he threatened you? No, but has he tried to enter your property? No, but he's watching me. And there were holes in the walls. Someone was spying. The officer sighed. The previous owner probably made those holes. Old houses have all kinds of quirks. Unless he does something illegal, there's nothing we can do. I wanted to scream. Instead, I thanked him and closed the door. That night, I heard footsteps in the attic. I was sure of it. Slow, deliberate steps, pacing back and forth directly above my bedroom. I grabbed my phone and a kitchen knife and crept upstairs. The attic door was closed, just as I'd left it. I pressed my ear against it. Silence. I opened the door slowly. The attic was empty. Just boxes and dust and the smell of old wood. But in the far corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A chair, facing the floor. And beneath it, a small hole drilled through the floorboards, giving a perfect view of my bedroom below. I ran downstairs, grabbed my car keys, and drove to a hotel. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't turn off the lights. I just left. The next morning, I called a locksmith and had every lock in the house changed. I installed cameras inside the house. Kitchen, living room, both bedrooms, the attic. I wasn't taking chances. For a week, everything was quiet. I started sleeping in my own bed again. I convinced myself I was safe. Then I saw the footage from the kitchen camera. It was 3:40 a.m. I was asleep upstairs, and Richard was in my kitchen. He wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there, in the dark, staring at the camera, smiling. I watched in horror as he stood there for 6 minutes, perfectly still, before turning and walking toward the basement door. The camera didn't have a view of the basement, so I couldn't see where he went. But I knew he had a key. Somehow, he had a key. I called the police again. This time, they took me seriously. They came with 2 officers, searched the entire house, checked all the locks. There was no sign of forced entry, no sign anyone had been inside. But the footage didn't lie. "Ma'am," one officer said gently, "is there anyone who might have a spare key? Previous owner's family, maybe?" "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking. "I changed all the locks. I don't understand how." "We'll file a report," the other officer said. "In the meantime, maybe stay somewhere else for a few days, just to be safe." I packed a bag and went back to the hotel. But before I left, I set up my laptop in the bedroom, with the camera feed streaming to my phone. I watched all night. At 2:17 a.m., Richard appeared on the front porch camera, staring at my window. At 3:40 a.m., he appeared in my kitchen again, but this time, I saw how he got in. The basement. The next morning, I went back to the house with a police escort. We checked the basement together. In the back corner, behind the furnace, was a small door. It was locked from my side, but when we opened it, we found a tunnel. It led directly to Richard's basement. The officer's face went pale. "Stay here," he said, and radioed for backup. They arrested Richard an hour later. When they searched his house, they found things that made me sick. Photos of me, taken through the holes in the wall before I'd patched them. A journal filled with entries about my daily routine. What time I woke up, what I ate for breakfast, when I went to bed. And in his bedroom, facing the wall that connected to my house, he had a chair, just like the one in my attic. He'd been listening. The police told me Richard had installed the tunnel years ago, when the previous owner, an elderly woman named Dorothy, had lived in my house. He'd convinced her he was helping her, checking on her, keeping her safe. By the time she realized what was happening, she was too frail to fight back. She'd died in that house, alone, while Richard watched from the other side of the wall. The trial was quick. Richard pleaded guilty to stalking, breaking and entering, and a dozen other charges. He was sentenced to 8 years. But during his statement to the court, he looked directly at me and smiled. "I was only trying to take care of you," he said, "just like I took care of Dorothy. That house needs someone who understands it. I'll be back." I sold the house 3 days after the trial ended. I didn't care that I lost money. I didn't care that the real estate agent warned me it would be hard to sell after everything that happened. I just wanted out. I live in an apartment now. 4th floor, no shared walls, no attic, no basement. I sleep with every light on, and I check the locks 5 times before bed. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it, that slow, dragging sound. And I know, deep down, that Richard was right about one thing. He'll be back, because the house wasn't the only thing he was watching. It was me. And now, no matter where I go, I can't shake the feeling that somewhere, someone, is standing in the dark, staring at a camera feed of my life, waiting for the perfect moment to knock 3 times and remind me that I was never really alone. The apartment building I moved into was supposed to be safe, modern, secure, 24-hour concierge, key card access, cameras in every hallway. I told myself this was different. This was a fresh start. Again. But on my 3rd night there, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single photograph. Me, walking into the building 2 days earlier, carrying a box. The angle was from across the street. Someone had been watching. Someone had been waiting. On the back, in handwriting I recognized immediately, were 4 words that made my hands shake. "Welcome home, Emma." I called Detective Morris, the officer who'd handled Richard's case. He tried to reassure me. "Richard is in prison, Miss Reeves. He can't contact you. Maybe it's a prank. Someone from the media, maybe, or—" "It's his handwriting," I interrupted. "I've seen it. It's him." There was a long pause. "Let me make some calls," he said finally. He called me back an hour later. Richard hasn't had any visitors. No phone calls, no mail going out. But he hesitated, and I felt my stomach drop. "What?" I demanded. His cellmate was released last week. Guy named David Carver. Served 18 months for identity theft. I hung up and immediately called the building manager. "I need to know if anyone named David Carver lives here or has visited recently." It took her 20 minutes to check. "No record of that name," she said. "But Miss Reeves, are you okay? You sound—" "I'm fine," I lied, and ended the call. I wasn't fine. I started checking the hallway cameras through the building's resident portal, scrolling back through days of footage. Most of it was mundane. Neighbors coming and going, delivery people, the occasional maintenance worker. Then I saw him. A man in a baseball cap and dark jacket, standing outside my door at 4 a.m. 3 nights in a row. He never knocked, never tried the handle. He just stood there, facing the door, for exactly 10 minutes each time before walking away. The camera angle didn't show his face, but I could see what he was holding. An envelope. I printed screenshots and took them to the police. They opened an investigation, but without a clear shot of his face, there wasn't much they could do. They increased patrols around my building and told me to keep my door locked, as if I wasn't already doing that. I stopped sleeping. Every creak, every footstep in the hallway made me freeze. I kept a baseball bat by the bed and a can of pepper spray in every room. I stopped answering the door, even for deliveries. I had everything sent to the concierge desk. 2 weeks later, I got another envelope. This time, it was waiting for me at the concierge desk, mixed in with my other mail. Inside was a page torn from Richard's journal. I recognized it immediately from the evidence photos the police had shown me during the trial. It was an entry dated 3 days before his arrest. "Emma doesn't understand yet. The house chose her, just like it chose Dorothy. Some people are meant to be watched over, protected. She'll see that eventually. Distance doesn't matter. Walls don't matter. I'll always be there, just on the other side, listening." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial Detective Morris's number. He came to my apartment that same day, along with another officer. They took the journal page as evidence and checked every inch of my apartment for cameras, bugs, anything. They found nothing. But that night, I heard it again. That dragging sound. I was lying in bed, frozen, listening to it come from the wall beside me. But this was a concrete building. There were no wooden walls, no crawl spaces, no tunnels. And yet, there it was. Drag, pause, drag, pause. I grabbed my phone and called 911. By the time the police arrived, the sound had stopped. They checked the neighboring apartment, the one that shared a wall with my bedroom. An elderly couple lived there. They'd been asleep all night. They hadn't heard anything. The officers looked at me with something between pity and suspicion. "Maybe you should talk to someone," one of them suggested gently. "A therapist. This kind of trauma, it can play tricks on your mind." "I'm not imagining it," I said, but even I could hear the desperation in my voice. After they left, I sat on my couch and cried for the first time since the trial. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was all in my head. Maybe Richard had broken something inside me that couldn't be fixed. But then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I heard you called the police. They don't believe you, but I do, because I'm listening too." I dropped the phone like it had burned me. I immediately blocked the number and reported it to Detective Morris, who promised to trace it. "It was a burner phone," he told me the next day. "Bought with cash at a convenience store in Newark. No way to trace it back to anyone." I felt like I was losing my mind. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except the growing certainty that someone was watching me, even here, even in this secure building with its cameras and locked doors. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Sharon who specialized in stalking cases. She swept my apartment with professional equipment and found something the police had missed. A small audio transmitter, no bigger than a button battery, hidden inside the electrical outlet behind my bed. Someone had been listening to everything. Sharon disabled it and took it as evidence, but the damage was done. Someone had been in my apartment. Someone had access. How long has this been here? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Based on the model, she said. Could be weeks, maybe longer. I moved out that same day. I didn't pack carefully. I didn't organize. I just threw everything I could into suitcases and left. I checked into a hotel under a fake name and paid cash. For 3 days, nothing happened. No letters, no texts, no sounds in the walls. I started to breathe again. Then, on the 4th night, I woke up to someone knocking on my hotel room door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I lay perfectly still, not breathing, staring at the door. Another 3 knocks. Emma, a voice called softly from the other side. It was muffled, but I knew that voice. I know you're scared, but you don't have to be. I'm not here to hurt you. I never was. I just want to talk. It was Richard's voice, but Richard was in prison. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called 911, whispering my location and room number. Then I locked myself in the bathroom and waited. The knocking stopped. I heard footsteps walking away. When the police arrived 10 minutes later, the hallway was empty. The hotel's security footage showed no one approaching my door. No one in the hallway at all. The officer looked at me with that same expression I'd seen before. Pity, concern, doubt. Ma'am, he said carefully, are you sure you heard knocking? I heard him, I insisted. It was Richard. I know it was. Richard Voss is in prison, the officer said gently. I checked before coming here. He's still there. He hasn't gone anywhere. Then who was at my door? I demanded. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. Maybe you had a nightmare, he suggested. Stress can do that. After they left, I called the prison directly. I needed proof, confirmation. The warden was professional but firm. Mr. Voss is currently in solitary confinement, he told me. He's been there for a week. Disciplinary reasons. He hasn't had contact with anyone. I felt the room spinning. If Richard was in solitary, then who had been knocking on my door? Who had been sending the letters? Who had planted the bug in my apartment? I called Sharon, the private investigator. She listened to everything, then said something that made my blood run cold. Emma, she said carefully, I need you to consider the possibility that this isn't about Richard anymore. What do you mean? I asked. I mean, someone else might have taken an interest in you. Someone who knows what Richard did. Someone who's using that fear against you. But why? I whispered. That's what we need to find out. She started digging into Richard's background, his associates, anyone who might have a reason to torment me. What she found was worse than I'd imagined. Richard had been part of an online community, a forum for people who shared his specific obsession, watching, documenting, collecting information about specific individuals. The forum had been shut down by the FBI 3 years ago, but not before dozens of members had connected. One of them lived in my city. His name was Thomas Leland, 46 years old, no criminal record, worked as an IT consultant, which meant he had access to security systems, cameras, networks. Sharon showed me his photo. I didn't recognize him. But when she showed me a list of buildings his company serviced, my stomach dropped. My apartment building was on the list. He had access to everything. The cameras, the keycard system, the resident portal. Sharon contacted Detective Morris immediately. They got a warrant and searched Thomas's apartment. What they found made national news. An entire room dedicated to surveillance. Monitors showing live feeds from dozens of cameras, most of them installed illegally in people's homes. Photos covering every wall. Hundreds of them. Different people, different locations, and in the center of it all, a corkboard dedicated entirely to me. Photos from before I'd even moved into the Victorian house. Photos from my old life, before the divorce. Thomas had been watching me for years. He'd known Richard. They'd communicated on the forum. And when Richard went to prison, Thomas had decided to continue his work. He was arrested that same day, but when the police brought him in, he was smiling. "You can't stop it," he said calmly. "There are more of us. We share everything. Every photo, every detail, every observation. Emma Reeves is famous now. Everyone's watching." I wanted to vomit. Detective Morris tried to reassure me. "We'll monitor online activity," he said. "We'll make sure no one else comes after you." But I knew the truth. You can't arrest everyone. You can't monitor every corner of the internet. Thomas was right. The information was out there now. My face, my habits, my fears. I was a target. I changed my name. Legally, Emma Reeves no longer exists. I moved across the country, to a place I'd never been before, where no one knew my face. I live alone. I don't use social media. I don't post photos. I cover my laptop camera and I check every room for devices twice a day. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That dragging sound. And I know it's not in the walls. It's in my head. Because Richard and Thomas weren't the problem. The house wasn't the problem. The problem is that once you become someone's obsession, you never really escape. You just learn to live with the feeling that somewhere, in some dark room, someone is watching your life like it's their favorite show. Waiting, listening, counting the days until they decide to knock 3 times and remind you that you were never really safe. You were just alone, and being alone is so much worse. The new town is small. One of those places where everyone knows everyone, where people still wave at strangers and leave their doors unlocked. I chose it specifically for that reason. Anonymity through community. If everyone watches everyone, then no one's watching just me. I got a job at the local library. Quiet work. Predictable. I rent a small cottage at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by woods on 3 sides. The landlord, an older man named Frank, seemed kind when I met him. He didn't ask many questions, which I appreciated. For 6 months, everything was fine. Normal. I started to believe I might actually be safe. Then I found the first photograph. It was tucked inside a book I'd checked out from the library. An old mystery novel I'd grabbed without thinking. When I opened it at home that night, a Polaroid fell into my lap. It was a picture of my cottage, taken from the woods. The angle showed my kitchen window, curtains open, me visible inside making dinner. The photo was recent. I was wearing the same sweater I'd bought 2 weeks ago. My hands went numb. I checked the book's checkout history on the library system. It had been returned anonymously through the Dropbox 3 days ago. No name, no record. I drove to the police station the next morning. The officer who took my report was young, maybe mid-20s, and he listened politely before explaining that without any direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. "But someone's watching me," I said, my voice rising. "Someone knows where I live." He promised to increase patrols in my area and advised me to install security cameras. I already had cameras. They hadn't helped before, but I didn't tell him that. That night, I went through every book in my cottage. Every single one. I found 3 more photographs. One of me at the grocery store. One of me walking into the library. One of me asleep on my couch, taken through my living room window. Someone had been watching for months. I called Sharon, my private investigator, the only person from my old life I still trusted. She listened without interrupting, then said what I already knew. "You need to leave. Tonight." "I can't keep running," I whispered. "Then you need to fight," she said. "But Emma, or whatever your name is now, you need to understand something. People like this, they don't stop. Not unless you make them." "How?" I asked. "You find out who they are before they find you." She arrived 2 days later. We set up a plan. We'd use me as bait. Sharon installed hidden cameras in the woods surrounding my cottage, motion activated, with night vision. We set up a monitoring system that would alert both of us if anything moved near the house. Then we waited. For 3 nights, nothing happened. On the fourth night, at 2:17 a.m., the same time Richard used to watch me, the motion sensor went off. I watched the feed on my phone from my locked bedroom. A figure was moving through the trees, slowly, carefully, staying just out of clear view. Sharon was parked down the street. She saw the alert too. "Stay inside," she texted. "I'm calling the police." But I couldn't just wait. I needed to see. I needed to know. I crept to the window and looked out. The figure was closer now, standing at the tree line, about 30 feet from my house. They were wearing dark clothes and a hood that obscured their face. They were holding something. A camera. My phone buzzed. Sharon again. "Police are 5 minutes out. Don't do anything stupid." But I was already moving. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door and turned on every outside light. The figure didn't run. They just stood there, camera raised, taking pictures even as the floodlights illuminated them. I couldn't see their face, but I could see them lower the camera slowly and wave. One hand. Slow. Deliberate. Then they turned and walked back into the woods. By the time the police arrived, they were gone. But Sharon's cameras had caught everything. We reviewed the footage together, frame by frame. The figure had been there before. The timestamp showed they'd been standing in the same spot every night for a week, always at the same time, always watching. "Can you enhance the image?" I asked Sharon. "Get a look at their face?" She tried. The hood and the darkness made it nearly impossible. But there was one frame, just one, where the figure had turned slightly and the camera caught a glimpse of their profile. Sharon's face went pale as she zoomed in. "What?" I demanded. "Who is it?" She turned the laptop toward me. The enhanced image showed enough to make my blood freeze. It was Frank, my landlord. The police arrested him the next morning. When they searched his house, they found what I'd expected. A room full of surveillance equipment. Photos of me covering the walls. A timeline documenting every move I'd made since moving to town. But they also found something I hadn't expected. Letters. Dozens of them. Written but never sent. All addressed to Richard Voss. Frank had been writing to Richard for years. They'd met on the same forum as Thomas. They'd shared information, techniques, obsessions. And when Richard went to prison, Frank had volunteered to keep tabs on me. "She needs someone," one letter read. Richard understood that. "She can't be left alone. I'll make sure she's protected. I'll make sure she's watched." During his interrogation, Frank admitted everything. He'd moved to this town 6 months before I did. He'd bought the cottage specifically to rent to me. He'd waited. "How did you know I'd come here?" I asked through the glass during a victim consultation the prosecutor arranged. Frank smiled. That same empty, eager smile I'd seen on Richard's face. "You were looking for somewhere quiet," he said. "Somewhere safe. Richard told me you'd run eventually. He told me what to look for. And when I saw your application, I knew." "You're insane," I whispered. His smile widened. "I'm dedicated," he corrected. "And I'm not the only one. We're a community, Emma. We take care of our own. And you're one of ours now." I left the police station shaking. Detective Morris tried to reassure me that Frank would go to prison, that they'd monitor his communications, that I'd be safe, but I knew better. Because 2 days later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was empty. The body of the email contained a single sentence. "Frank was sloppy. We won't be." Attached was a photo of me leaving the police station. I forwarded it to Detective Morris immediately, but the email was untraceable, routed through multiple proxy servers in different countries. That night, I packed everything I could carry and left. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not Sharon, not the police, no one. I've been moving ever since. I've lived in 12 different places in the last 8 months. I never stay longer than 3 weeks. I pay cash for everything. I don't use the same name twice. I don't make friends. I don't form routines, but they always find me. Sometimes it's a photograph slipped under a door. Sometimes it's a text from a burner phone. Sometimes it's just the feeling of being watched, that prickling certainty that somewhere, someone has their eyes on me. Last week, I was in a diner in a town I'd never been to before. I was eating alone, trying to blend in, when the waitress brought me a cup of coffee I hadn't ordered. "From the gentleman at the counter," she said, pointing. I looked over. There was no one at the counter, just an empty stool and a coffee cup. When I looked down, there was a note under my saucer. "You can't run forever, Emma. Eventually, you'll want to come home." I left $40 on the table and walked out. I'm writing this from another hotel room in another anonymous town. I've changed my hair again, cut it short and dyed it dark. I wear colored contacts now. I avoid cameras when I can and cover my face when I can't. But I know it doesn't matter, because they're not watching me anymore. They're hunting me. And the worst part is, I don't even know how many of them there are. Richard, Thomas, Frank. How many others were in that forum? How many others are out there right now, sharing my photos, tracking my movements, waiting for their turn? Sharon calls me sometimes, from different numbers. She's still trying to help, still trying to find a way to stop this. But we both know the truth. You can't stop an obsession, you can only try to survive it. Last night, I heard the sound again. That slow, dragging sound. It was coming from the wall next to my bed, even though I'm on the 20th floor of a hotel with concrete walls. I know it's not real. I know it's just my mind, fractured from months of fear and paranoia. But I also know that somewhere, in some dark room, someone is listening to a recording of me breathing. Someone is looking at a photo of me sleeping. Someone is planning, and when they're ready, they'll knock 3 times, because that's what they do. They watch, they wait, they knock, and eventually, they come inside. I used to think the scariest thing about being watched was the violation of privacy, the loss of control, but I was wrong. The scariest thing is realizing that no matter where you go, no matter how many times you change your name or your face or your life, you'll never really be alone. Because somewhere, someone has decided you belong to them, and they'll never let you go. The dragging sound is getting closer now. I can hear it even with the TV on, even with earplugs in. Drag, pause, drag, pause. Any minute now, there will be 3 knocks on my door. And I'll have to decide whether to run again or finally open it and see who's been following me all this time. But I already know what I'll see. Not Richard, not Thomas, not Frank, just someone else. Someone new. Someone who's been waiting their turn. Because the house wasn't haunted. I am. And no matter where I go, I'll always hear them coming. Closer, closer. Knock, knock, knock.